Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be giving you a spoiler review for Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't checked out my theater reaction to the movie, kind of like a audio reaction, you can barely see my face for a part of it, but go check that video out if you want to hear some of my I guess noises I make during the movie. I don't know, because a couple moments had me quite shocked. You can hear some of my audio there and just hear the audience reactions. It was a fun little thing to put together. And of course, also I did a spoiler-free review, which went into the positives and the negatives of the film, but it was all spoiler-free. And also I gave a rating at the end of the video, a score for the film. But today I want to just talk about the whole movie. All the plot points, all the big things that I didn't want to talk about in that video because I consider them to be spoilers. So, as I said in my spoiler-free review, I loved the movie. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Incredible. There were some things I didn't like, and I kind of vaguely talked about it in the video, but we'll get a little bit deeper with it in this one. But I kind of want to just go through the whole movie and just talk about all the different plot points, all the different story points that go on in this movie, and just talk about my thoughts about each and every scene in the movie, really. I mean, each of the scenes that I feel like are important to talk about. Obviously, I'm not going to go in depth to every little thing in the film, and we'll get to the good stuff soon, so definitely, keep around for that. So starting off with the first act, I like how the movie just gets right into it. It just starts right where Far From Home left off. Peter's like, holy shit. Things are going down. Everyone knows who I am now. Everyone thinks I'm a murderer. So things get kind of crazy, and he has to just peace out. And there's a lot of repercussions for this. You have news people just completely swarming his home, and they have a lot of trouble with that. And the Daredevil scene comes in pretty quick. I kind of knew this was coming just based off of leaks and stuff, but he didn't have as big of a role in the film that I thought he would. I thought he was going to have at least like a 15, not a 15, but like at least 5 to 10 minute scene maybe. There was apparently some rumors of a cut court scene room. Apparently there was supposed to be a court scene room. I don't know how true that is, but I guess that's what happened. They just cut a whole court scene room that I guess he was in, and probably included Matt Murdock. But he was great in the few minutes that he was in it. I mean, he had a cool moment where he caught the brick that came at them, and it was fun. It was enjoyable. I didn't do much with him, but it was a cameo, so it was fine. But I think it would have been a lot better if no one knew it was coming, but obviously the leaks kind of, showed us that it was happening, so it wasn't as exciting because of that. But still, just forget about the fact that it was a leak. It's still awesome to see him there. It's awesome to see them acknowledge the Daredevil show, basically meaning that it is technically part of the MCU, and also Hawkeye, that show. Spoilers for Hawkeye if you haven't seen Hawkeye yet. They're starting to introduce Kingpin to that, which is really cool. I really liked how they were developing the relationship between Peter and MJ in the beginning here, because I didn't really care for the relationship in Far From Home. I thought the relationship was kind of iffy. It felt kind of like, not forced, but kind of rushed. But I think it was really well done here and believable. I think a big part of that is the chemistry between Tom Holland and Zendaya is just really good. So I felt somewhat connected to their characters here, and that means a lot for what they do with their characters later in the film. And it makes it actually an impactful love story. I would argue it's the second best love story for Spider-Man so far. Nothing beats Peter and Gwen from The Amazing Spider-Man. Nothing beats that. But I think, honestly, this is probably better than the Peter and MJ stuff from the Raimi trilogy. I mean, I didn't have an issue with that relationship. I mean, I had some issues with some of the things they did with some of the films, but I think what they're doing with, Peter and MJ in this is good stuff. I really like it, and it has big repercussions for what's going to happen later because of everything that happens towards the end of the film, which we'll get to soon. It also establishes a really good motivation here for why Peter wants to do this spell in the first place, because he can't get into college and his friends can't get into college, which that's smart. If it was just Peter not being able to get into college, I wouldn't like it, because Spider-Man is not a selfish person. Like, he has selfish, instincts that sometimes come out, but for the most part, he's not a selfish person. He does everything for others, and it makes sense for him to be motivated to try to fix this because his friends can't get into college because of him, and that kind of makes him feel guilty, and therefore he goes to Doctor Strange to do the spell. That's a good motivation. That's a believable motivation. It's not as stupid as I originally thought it was, because originally I was like, why not just try to, figure it out in court? Maybe you can just figure that all out, and then maybe you'll come out on top. Okay, I don't know, but the whole thing about them, having their lives ruined because of college, it makes it kind of more believable. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And I actually kind of like how that plays out. And then when they go to Doctor Strange and the whole problem arises, in the trailers, they made it seem really dumb. And I always had an issue with it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Peter is going to cause this whole problem just because he can't shut up. But the way they execute it makes a lot of sense in this scene. And I'm kind of like okay with it. I'm like, that kind of makes sense. It makes sense why he would be trying to talk to Strange while he's doing it. And it kind of just screws it all up. And yeah, it's kind of, immature thing, but he's an immature person. He's a kid. And I like how they acknowledge that. Doctor Strange literally acknowledges, he's like, yes, I forget you're a kid sometimes. Maybe we shouldn't have been doing this. And it's fine. I'm okay with characters making mistakes, especially if they're the ones to redeem the whole problem in the end, or at least take part in redeeming that problem. And I think they did, so that's good. And then we get Peter going to the MIT lady to try and, fix these issues because he's not sure that the spell worked, obviously, because it kind of like stopped, but it did apparently. Part of it did. And, well, no, the spell didn't work. It just, what happened was that it brought people who knew Spider-Man from others, who knew Spider-Man's real identity from other dimensions, came into this universe. Now, that doesn't make complete sense to me. And we'll talk about that in a little. I think it's kind of a plot hole, but I might be wrong on it, but we'll talk about it. But that scene on the bridge with Doc Ock was chef's kiss amazing. I love that bridge action scene. That was some of the best action from this movie. There were some other scenes that were really good as well, but this scene was awesome. We saw a lot of it in the trailers and the teasers, but we saw even more here in the movie. They cut a lot out in the trailers and stuff, so there's a lot here that was new. It's a great scene. I loved it. And then he, gets Doc Ock and captures him. And I think the way he captured him made sense using the nanotech. And I liked it. I liked that scene. It was solid. And when Green Goblin comes there, I wish they had one little fight scene with Goblin with his suit, because this is the only scene we see him in his suit. And we already saw that shot with him in the suit in the trailer. So it was a little disappointing to not have Green Goblin in his iconic suit for like any of the film other than one shot. I would have liked at least one scene with it here. I like having Willem Dafoe's face in the rest of the movie. That was awesome, but it would have been nice just having one more scene with his suit that they kind of had some sort of a fight with, and I would have loved that. I would have absolutely loved that. So then we kind of get into the second act here. I would say that's kind of when the first act ends, and then the second act kind of starts, where they have to start this hunt to collect all these villains. Doctor Strange is like, we got to get them here, and we got to send them back. And Peter at first is kind of in agreement with it. He's like, that makes sense. But Aunt May is kind of the one to change his mind a little bit, because Aunt May's like, no, that's not what we do. We don't just send people back. We kind of, rehabilitate them. It's a very moral issue here. And I do like how they're trying to cover this moral issue, because it's not like some sort of political issue where they're being pandering to one side or something. I feel like they kind of make a point for both these moral issues of if people can be redeemed or not. It's not like it's trying to force a message. It's literally just showing a moral dilemma that Spider-Man goes through and has with Doctor Strange here, where they don't know what they should do with these people. Should we give them a second chance, or should we just send them back and let them die? And that moral dilemma is really interesting, and I really like how it kind of flows throughout the film. We get the scene with Electro and Sandman, which was really cool to hear Electro's soundtrack, but they played it for like 2 seconds and then they just stopped. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I was just hoping, just play his soundtrack for the whole damn scene. Remix it, I don't care, but give us the Electro theme. Why did you only play it for 2 seconds? I don't know. But regardless, that scene was still really awesome. Electricity being sent everywhere. I love how he started off as Blue, just to keep the consistency with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but then he kind of changes because of, different things that happen as the film goes along. And I like how Sandman was helping Spider-Man at first. That was smart. It doesn't ruin his redemption, because we knew he had redemption. I still don't get the decision to have him as a Sandman the whole movie when that's not how he was in Spider-Man 3. I don't get why they decided to make him a CGI monster the whole movie. I'm assuming, this is my assumption, right? I'm assuming Thomas Church, who is the actor who plays Sandman, I'm pretty sure that was the same actor who played him in this one. I don't think this was someone different. I'm pretty sure it was the same guy. Because they had him at the end there, unless that was CGI, but there's no way that was CGI. But my assumption is that they can only get him for that ending scene, and they weren't able to get him for the rest of the movie. They weren't able to get him to shoot scenes for the rest of the movie. So instead he just shot from a studio maybe across the country somewhere and just did all the lines. That could be because of the pandemic or something else, I don't know, but it is a little disappointing regardless. I don't care if there's an excuse, like a real life excuse for why that was the case. I just do think it was still disappointing to have Thomas Church not present and just have his voice instead in some sort of a CGI monster, because I don't think the CGI monster looked that great. The CGI in the movie was great for the most part, but I didn't think Sandman's CGI was that good. And when he was like walking around, I mean, like, you know, later scenes it was fine, but for those couple scenes where he was just talking and stuff, it was a little iffy. So I wasn't huge on that. And I also think they didn't do enough with this character in this one. I feel like Sandman was kind of wasted. They didn't do really anything with him. There's a lot of villains there, so it's hard to balance them, but that's why I do feel like this movie could have been like 20 minutes longer, maybe. I don't know. Then you have Norman Osborn, who kind of comes back to himself. He's got the goblin side of him kind of out of him for a little bit, but it's still there. It's just not corrupting his mind in that moment. And eventually they get all the villains, all 5 of them, into the lair. And their interactions were great here. Like I said in my spoiler-free review, I had some issues with some, like, you know, iconic quotes being repeated just for the sake of it. Like, I'm something of a scientist myself. It's like, there was no reason for Norman to say that in that moment. It was literally, it felt like a parody for a second because they just forced that line in there. And I was thinking the whole time, like it was funny. I laughed. But then a couple seconds later, I'm like, that's kind of stupid. And I know for a fact when I watch it a second time, I'm not going to laugh again because it's just a stupid, forced fan service line. I like fan service, but that's not good fan service. Good fan service is like, I'm going to say something good about The Rise of Skywalker. Not saying Rise of Skywalker is a better movie than this, not even close. But having Palpatine say do it in Rise of Skywalker was good fan service because it was organic. It made sense why he would say do it in that moment. But there's no reason why Goblin would say the exact same phrase. You know, I'm something of a scientist myself. Like, it just came across as so forced, and it doesn't feel like Norman Osborn was saying that. It felt like Willem Dafoe was told to say that in the script, and therefore he said it. And that's not anything wrong with Willem Dafoe's acting, because he did incredible here. It's just a forced line that it's impossible for any great actor to make that sound, you know, somewhat reasonable for someone to say. Same thing with Doc Ock. He says, the power of the sun in the palm of my hands, like 2 times in this movie, and I'm like, why are you it's not like it's a quote that like is a common thing to say. It was a one-time thing that was a meme. It was an iconic line, but like, don't repeat it. The one that I was okay with, and I actually kind of laughed and got a really good laugh at, and actually thought it was perfectly fine, later in the film with Tobey saying something about his back hurting or whatever. That was funny because it's, yes, your back can hurt, but obviously it's a callback to when he was like, my back in Spider-Man 2. And that was a fine callback. That was like a funny one that you're only going to understand if you're a big fan of the movies. And it was organic. Like, that makes sense why he would be complaining about his back right there. That's a realistic thing to complain about. So just wanted to mention that real quick. And then after we have all the villains interacting in the lair, Peter starts to realize that they can possibly rehabilitate them. And so that, you know, starts this fight between Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, which, you know, brings us to Peter versus Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, which was one of the best scenes in the movie, just from a visual perspective. Like, the visuals were freaking amazing. I mean, this is one of the best looking scenes in a Spider-Man movie in a while. And I was all for the entirety of it. One of the coolest parts was when he went through that one, I think it was like a mall. It was like the mall was like, you know, shifting in and out of reality. And there was the Christmas music playing in it. That little touch of Christmas music was nice because this does take place around Christmas. People don't really realize that because there wasn't much Christmas feels to it except for the snow at the end. But I kind of wish they had snow throughout the whole film. That would have been awesome. But regardless, it's still a Christmas themed movie. And having that scene was awesome. Just to hear the Christmas music for just a second, that was awesome. But the fight itself was great as well, and it was cool how Peter figured the situation out. He used math to kind of overtake his magic. That was cool. And then we get to probably the goofiest part of the movie that was still really fun, and I didn't really care that it was really goofy, but part of me wishes it was a little more serious than humorous. But that's when he takes all the villains to the apartment, and they're just kind of chilling and talking, and everyone's just kind of like trying to, you know, figure this situation out. And it was a little goofy, some of the scenes, but some of the scenes were really great too. I think Electro and Sandman had some cool pieces of dialogue towards each other that I actually kind of liked, even though Sandman they didn't do much with. That was definitely his best scene in my opinion. And then, you know, as time goes on, Goblin just comes back into his mind and overtakes Norman, and that's when chaos ensues, and we get probably second best scene of the movie. Nothing's gonna beat the stuff with Tobey and Andrew at the end, but this scene was great. This scene was awesome, like every second of it, because the tension was building. I heard some rumors and leaks and stuff of possibly Goblin killing Aunt May months ago. I didn't know if it was real or not. I was hoping it was real because I loved the sound of it. It sounds fucked up to say that. I don't wish death upon anybody, but this is a movie, and I really wanted something impactful and consequential to happen to Tom Holland's Spider-Man that we get to see. And this was that. I mean, Tony Stark's death was huge. It was. But like for him, this is even huger. This is his mother practically. And it was beautifully done. Maybe not beautifully done. There was one thing I was a little iffy on, but it was mostly beautifully done. Especially the build up to it, because you had so much tension. You know, Aunt May was running downstairs to get the hell out of there, and Peter was just, you know, kicking the shit out of Goblin. The Goblin was kicking the shit at him. One of the best parts is when he's punching Goblin in the face and Goblin's laughing. I was like, oh, this is so good. When he was laughing in his damn face, even through getting punched. That is Green Goblin right there. That is Green Goblin. I don't know how Willem Dafoe hasn't been the Joker yet, because he gave me Joker vibes throughout this whole scene. But like, that's not even, because Goblin and Joker have similar mannerisms to them. That's the only reason why people make the comparison in the first place. They're very different characters, but the mannerisms are pretty similar. And I would love to see Willem Dafoe as Joker, that's all I'm saying. But this is obviously still him playing Goblin, and he did a phenomenal job in this scene. Then he gets his glider to come and just ram Aunt May, and once he rammed Aunt May, I was like, it's done. She's dead. And even the bomb was just the, you know, icing on the cake there. And the one thing I was iffy on is she got up and she was like having a full-on conversation with Tom. I don't know how she was doing that. I'm calling it Tom. I'm honestly going to be calling them Tom, Tobey, and Andrew throughout this whole video, because it's so much easier than calling them Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3. So that's just the way I'm going to probably do it a couple times on accident. But the way she's talking to Peter here, it didn't seem like she was in pain, and I don't really blame Marissa Tomei for that. I just think you were giving her a lot of dialogue in a scene that was like, I don't know how you would even be giving that while you were just impaled pretty badly. But then again, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't have a PhD, so I don't know. Maybe you'll be all right for a little bit. Maybe the pain doesn't settle in until a few seconds after. I don't know. But her speech there was great. Marissa Tomei did a great job. Definitely the best scene of Aunt May we've ever seen thus far, and I loved it. And Tom Holland's acting when she does die is brilliant. It's amazing, incredible. And then that ends the second act, and we go into the third act, which is the best part of the movie, definitely. I don't think anyone's gonna probably deny that for obvious reasons. And the scene that we get starting the third act, it's just, you know, Ned and MJ chilling. I think that was Ned's grandma's place, or maybe that was Ned's place and just her grandma lives there, I don't know. And or his grandma lives there, and that was just awesome the way they did it, the way he was using the Doctor Strange's little thingy and opening the portal. And when I saw him there, I knew for the second you saw him in the distance, I was like, oh, that's Andrew. They're gonna reveal Andrew first. No shit, that would make sense to do it first, and that's perfect how they did it. This scene was perfectly done. For a while, I thought their introduction would be like an Endgame type introduction, where it's during a battle scene where Tom's Peter is getting messed up. He's taking on the 5 villains on himself, which part of me does wish that we had something like that, like where he was actually fighting 5 villains on his own. Like, that would be really awesome if we did get that. We got, you know, scenes with all the villains involved, but most of them just kind of leave. It was never a scene where he was fighting 5 on 1. So I kind of wish we did have something like that. That's what I thought. I thought they would come from portals and then help him right then and there. But the reason why I think it's almost better the way they did it here is because the way they did it here, we got time to breathe. We got time to just hear what they've been up to and just listen to their voice and just, hear that. Because if we just saw them swinging in as Spider-Man and they were just, going all over the place in an action sequence, and that was the first second we were seeing them, we would have so many questions running through our mind during that scene that it would be kind of hard to take it all in. You know what I mean? And this scene did a great job of letting us take it all in. It was funny too. The humor was good. I did not know what they were going to do with humor here. I did not know how Tobey and Andrew were going to play with the humor of the MCU, but I was okay with it. I wanted to be more serious. I do even think to the second, I do wish it was a little more serious, but this scene was completely fine being the way it was because, yeah, the situation's kind of funny. Like, there is funny things happening here, and the conversations are funny, and the main thing that makes it so great is the chemistry between Andrew and Tobey, and then later Tom. I need another movie with these three. I need it. They are the perfect, you wouldn't call it a duology, a trio. They're the perfect trio. Like, they work off each other in this movie fucking beautifully. Especially, like, I love Tom Holland, but especially Tobey and Andrew. Their scenes together were like just amazing. My childhood was just freaking blown up into excitement because I've been watching these movies since I was 4. Since I was 4 back in 2004. Ever since my consciousness started to, gain something where I started to like things and remember things. I think you start remembering things when you're like 4 or 5, something like that. I don't know. Ever since I can remember, I've been a big fan of Spider-Man. Like, I can't remember a time where I wasn't, so it was around that time where I started getting into Spider-Man, and that was around the time Spider-Man 2 came out, and then Spider-Man 3, and I saw Spider-Man 3 in theaters when I was 7 years old, and I've seen every other one since then, and I've always loved Tobey and Andrew's portrayals pretty much equally, and then Tom's I've loved as well. So seeing them all on screen and interacting and talking, it was like the biggest dream you could ask for. So regardless of, my negatives about the movie, and regardless of wanting more, I'm just happy this happened in the first place. I'm just happy this happened at all, especially because Tobey and Andrew deserved more. They do. Tobey, I think, got a good finish. As much as I love him, and he definitely deserves more, Andrew deserves more, even more, because he didn't get a... I think I liked The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and the way it ended, but the way it ended was kind of weird because it was setting up a lot more, and he never got that. And he was also heartbroken that he didn't get that. He was heartbroken that they didn't get to do more. And he got to do more. And he was having so much fun with it. Like, Tobey did great, don't get me wrong, but Andrew was definitely the highlight of this movie. I think, like, I know it's Tom's movie. I know, I'm sorry, Tom Holland, but I liked Andrew even more in this. He was freaking amazing, man. Amazing. Every scene with that man, I was like, this guy's hilarious. And when he wants to be serious, it brings out emotion. That's the thing. Like, 1 second you're laughing at him, his humor, and the next second you're tearing up because he catches MJ when she's falling, and it's like, fuck, this is good. So I need to see more of them. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, so we get the first scene with them is obviously on the building, which had one of the best shots in Spider-Man history when Peter's looking at the broadcast on the building and he's standing on the building in the rain. That was one of the best shots I've ever seen in a Spider-Man movie. And then we get their conversation, and this is a serious conversation. There's no humor here, thank God. If they threw a joke in this scene, I would have probably left the theater. No, I'm kidding, I wouldn't have left the theater, but I would have been pissed. They didn't throw any jokes. It was just a serious scene, just a talk between 3 Spider-Men about Uncle Ben. They talk about Aunt May, they talk about Gwen, and it was beautiful. And then the great power comes great responsibility line comes up, which Andrew said that he was like in agreement that that's what Uncle Ben said when the line came up, but Uncle Ben never said that in The Amazing Spider-Man. He said like a variation of it, but he didn't say that exact thing. Unless he did and we just never saw it on screen. I don't know, whatever. Besides the point. I'm just saying it was a little iffy. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention this. I was talking about before one plot hole that I thought I had with the whole spell thing. Why did Electro come into this universe if the spell was only bringing people who knew Peter Parker's or Spider-Man's identity? Because to my knowledge, Electro never knew his identity. He never even knew who Peter Parker was, right? He never had a talk with... There was never a point in Spider-Man 2 where he found out who Spider-Man was. Unless I missed a line of dialogue that explained that in the movie, I might have. I don't know, but to me that didn't make sense. But that's a plot hole that I can forgive. I don't really care. That's not a big deal. It's just I thought about it. I'm like, that's a little weird. We got the scene of them trying to fix up the serums and the antidotes to cure them all in the lab, which was a really funny scene because this is when the dialogue started to come in of just, you know, all these different characters back and forth, and it was awesome. Especially the scene where Ned was asking Tobey if he had a friend, and he brought up Harry, and he was like, yeah, my friend died in my arms after he tried to kill me, and Ned's like, oh god. And it's funny for comic fans because you do know that Ned does actually become the Hobgoblin in one of the comics, and I wonder if they'll do that here in this universe. I have no idea. I don't know how they're gonna figure that all out. But then we get the fight at the Statue of Liberty, which I loved. I do think could have been a little bit better though. I wish there was more daytime scenes because you can just see better. CGI looks a lot better in daytime than I think it does at nighttime usually. So some of the CGI was great, but some of it was also like overused in some scenes where I was like, okay, you probably could have done more practical work here. But it's alright, I'll forgive you. It still was an awesome scene, especially when the Spider-Man put on the masks together and jumped off and were like swinging webs and like swinging webs onto each other and like swinging off each other. Like that was awesome. That was an awesome scene, and they all jump on the Statue of Liberty head at the same time. Really cool stuff. But I just wish the fight was a little bit longer, maybe more action sequences in between it. That's all I'm saying. But like I said, Tobey and Andrew steal the show with their lines of dialogue between this entire fight, for sure. Even Tom had some good lines too. And I said before, Andrew saving MJ was probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, so that was a plus. And then we get when daytime does come, and Peter gets to fight Norman Osborn, the Tom Holland Peter. And when he almost kills Green Goblin, that was awesome. That was brilliantly done. I loved how brutal that was. I loved how he just brought out all his anger, all his built up anger, and just took it all out on Norman, almost to the point of killing him. But thankfully didn't, because Tobey stops him. And then when Tobey gets stabbed there, I thought for a second he was going to die. And I'm very glad they didn't, because I want to see more of him. I don't know if we will. We'll talk about that in a little, but I want to see more. I want to see more of Tobey and Andrew. That's all I'm saying. I don't know if they will, though. They don't really leave it. They leave it open for that, but they don't give us really any hints that it's going to happen. I think that's because they don't even know themselves if it's going to happen. It all depends on if Tobey and Andrew even can, to be honest. It's probably the case. But that scene was great. I liked how he kind of just rubbed it off as nothing, even though I think my whole theater thought he was about to die for a second there, and I was about ready to, you know, bawl my eyes out, but I didn't, because he didn't die, thankfully. And then I talked about this in my other review, because I said there was something that really fixed Peter's character, like MCU Peter, for me. And that was exactly what happens with the spell here. The fact that the spell, the only way to do it, Peter makes this big sacrifice, this monumental sacrifice to save everyone by doing the spell that Doctor Strange said he can do that would make everyone forget who he is and forget any memories they ever had with him. That's a huge, that's like his entire life just vanished. Like every relationship he made doesn't matter anymore. It only is in his head. And I was like, damn. And I loved it because it does so many good things with the character now. The character of Peter is exactly what I want him to be. I loved MCU Peter, but I always had an issue with him having all the Stark technology, and he felt like he wasn't dealing with, you know, your typical Peter Parker issues. He kind of just had everything kind of handed to him. But this showed big consequences. His actions caused this, and it just had to happen. It's just the way it had to be. And he was willing to make that sacrifice so everyone else can be safe and everyone else can have a good life. And the way he has to deal with it in the end is awesome. He goes to the apartment. It's a very Peter Parker-esque apartment, and he makes his own suit, and that suit he made was freaking amazing. One of the best looking suits I've ever seen. And I just loved it. What would have been the cherry on top is if Mr. Dickovich was the landlord of that apartment, but they didn't get that guy back, unfortunately. I wish they did. That would have been awesome. That would have made the movie for me by far, but they didn't do that, unfortunately. I'm sure they just couldn't get the guy. They probably tried. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried, because that would have made everyone die of laughter if they did do that, but they didn't. And last but not least, we have the Venom post-credit scene and the Doctor Strange 2 post-credit scene, which was basically just a trailer. The Venom one, I'm just iffy on because I was really excited to see Tom Hardy's Venom in the MCU, but I'm starting to think they're not going to do that, and instead the Venom is just going to go on to someone else, and they're going to have a different Venom in the MCU, which could work. I don't know. We'll see how it works. Unless they're just going to have Tom Hardy also play Eddie Brock in the MCU, which would be kind of weird, because, like, well, then what's the point of... I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out. I'm sure it can play out just fine. But it was a cool post-credit scene. It just, makes you think of what the hell is going to come next. But it also makes me feel like they're going to really try to separate the MCU and the Sony movies, which I was hoping they wouldn't try to separate them that much. But I guess they are. I don't know. Big deal. Whatever. It's not a big deal. And then we get the Doctor Strange 2 trailer, which looked awesome. Not much to say about it other than it looked awesome. Evil Doctor Strange in there looked great. Wanda looks great. Sam Raimi's directing it, so I know it's going to be a masterpiece, pretty much. So I'm really excited for that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about this movie in the comment section below. All spoilers are allowed in the comments here because this is a spoiler review. I will see you all on my next one. Oh, last thing I just wanted to mention. Are we going to get future movies with Andrew and Tobey? I don't know, but I hope. I just want to say that I hope we do. I want to see them make a Spider-Man 3. I want to see a Spider-Man 4. I don't care how. I want it. Maybe another Spider-Verse movie even. Maybe a movie with Peter, with Spider-Gwen. I don't know. Andrew's Peter, that is, with Spider-Gwen as Emma Stone. That would be awesome, but that's just besides the point. I just want to throw that out there. I would love to see that. Sony, if you're listening, do it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.